Hello everyone, welcome to a update to my refined tier list. And oh boy do we have a lot to talk about. First off, before we start, I would like to mention the fact that I've put Felicia down a tier. This should be obvious, but I'll explain why. Felicia has too much res in Arena to really bait the most important mage that is in Arena, which is Legendary Azura. So, in Arena Assault or Allegiance Battle, if you have to, well, Allegiance Battle less so, but say Arena Assault, which is where you get to use all of your unit to fight, Felicia baiting Azura typically just doesn't happen, because her res is so high that Azura struggles to do any kind of damage to her, and the way dancers work is if they do 5 or more damage, they will attack over dancing. However, if they don't do 5 or more damage, they will dance instead of attacking. This means that if a unit goes to rally Azura, she's going to dance said unit, and that unit will have 3 movement to strike and typically kill Felicia, because of course her bulk is about as good as paper. So yeah, and similar in AR as well, rally traps are just going to backfire on you all the time as a result. Not to mention, speaking of AR, the place where mage tanks are key, well, AoEs ignores battle stuff, so the fact that you have an in-combat 2-charge, essentially special fighter without the guard effect, just doesn't do anything for you at the end of the day, because, well, the AoE will typically do 30 plus damage on the AoE itself, 20 on the hit after. You're typically dead. Because Ophelia is the main girl here, and Ophelia typically can hit upward to 75 attack if she so pleases on defense. So, as a result, well, even if you have 50 res, you take 37 damage from the AoE alone and then die. So, despite being a res tank, well, you're not really doing your job properly, which is kind of a shame. And a lot of infantry team comp also has, well, infantry pulse team comps. And then you're dealing with specials like, say, Sonya with Instant Luna, which has a plus 10 damage because of her weapon, typically one-shotting you as a result. You have Instant Glacies on Sonya, you have Instant Draconic Aura / Glimmer on Lyn Lucina. There is so many problems that you can run into as far as Felicia is concerned. And then there's rally trapping. Say there's Alm that goes to do a rally, and then Azura goes to just dance Alm. What are you going to do with Felicia? You're just going to take the hit and die. That's just how it is. You can't really change that, and that's kind of why you typically use a mixed tank in AR rather than a res tank and a melee tank. Because it's not always easy to just be able to use your melee tank or your res tank in all situations. Sometimes you have to tank both. And so having a tank like Felicia just becomes irrelevant. So, yeah. All that to say, Felicia is overall fairly underwhelming right now. I might even down her to A tier, I'm not sure. But yeah, she is very underwhelming right now. So, yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Bravelyn. So, first off, the base effect got changed. Instead of dull magic, you have dull ranged. Cool, I suppose. And the refine just gives her 4 across the board if she has more speed than the enemy, which is an easy condition enough to fulfill. The issue, however, is the way you typically use Bravelyn in, say, AR defense is Fire Sweep with double Poison Strike. This is safer because unless they have No See Disrupt, which Even now is rare to see a tank with it because it's infantry exclusive, and good infantry users that has the skill are very few and far between, like say Fall and Corrin, and typically people want to have merges on their tank, so it's not exactly ideal, is it? So, yeah. Fire Sweep is typically used so you can fight the enemy tank, take off 20 HP from Poison Strike even if you do 0 damage at base, get Dance do it again, or kill something in the back, and yeah, it's quite simple really. Then, since their tank has no more HP left, it's typically easy pickings from there. I don't think I have to explain more to it. Brave Bow is also really good in the end of the player to clear most of the in-game content, and in some cases AA, though frankly you'll typically just be using Brave Bow for stuff like abyssal maps and so on. If you're talking about Mulligear, however, well, it does have its place, it's just not a good one in general. It's a good refine, it definitely helps her, it's 4 across the board, but, well, typically unless you really want to put your money where your mouth is, it's not exactly easy to go with a set that really works with it. Here's an example. Now, to put it simply, Sturdy Blow in attack def solo pushes your def by 10, so you're at 38 in both. Low attack def reduces your enemy's attack by 3, which means your def is essentially increased by 3 to both, so 41 def and res. Then Mulligear gives 4 across the board if you have more speed than the enemy, which means you have 45 def and res. Do note that you can still use Mystic Boost instead of low attack def. However, low attack def also increases your damage. So your 48 speed becomes 52 speed. There's also that because of Mulligear. Then the weapon basically pushed that 60 attack to 64 attack, attack def bond to 70 attack, Sturdy Blow to 74 attack, and because of low attack def reducing the enemy's def by 3, you're effectively at 77 attack. 77 attack, 52 speed, 45 def, and 45 res. This is quite effective, but the issue ends up that it's purely player phase typically. Still, it's fairly solid, it's just since you don't have anything such as Gale Force, well, it's not nearly as important, let's just put it that way. Still, I can imagine this to be fairly solid in stuff such as AA, and to some extent, again, Abyssal map just like Brave Bow is. It's just not exactly necessary because Brave Bow, for the most part, will get you through Abyssal as long as, of course, you have some kind of knowledge going into it. Frankly, I've cleared so many Abyssal with just Reinhardt and Lyn with Brave Bow, it's kind of stupid. That wasn't my ult back when I cared. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Next one is Brave Lyn. Lucina, even. As you can see, she is a bit lower than what people probably expected her to be. Brave Lucina is just very awkward. She gives 3 across the board and also gives a breath effect to any melee unit around her. Seems simple enough. However, the buff might as well be nothing because as far as buff are concerned, there's just better. Kaden exists. A lot of people already forgot about one of the best buffer of this game, but that's true. The only reason I do consider Legendary Eliwood as a better buffer is because it can buff across the map. It's just that. If you look further than that, well, I'm sorry to say, but Kaden just gives 6 across the board to anything around it, as long as he's buffed by 6 across the board, which is very easy to get. Just basically run speed res link, and then someone would attack our in-depth tactic, like say, oh, I don't know, legendary Azura. And suddenly you have 6 across the board for all your members. That's pretty good. But then that's twice the stat that Lucina buffs. Yeah. Kind of a weird situation, isn't it? So the only thing Lucina really has is a breath effect for physical unit. Now, let me explain why this refine doesn't really work in a way that's, you know, easier to digest. The weapon at its base was meant to be an offensive weapon, an offensive buffing tool for weapons that typically hits twice, like say Brave Bow especially. So people would just stack attack buffs or spur attack speed, now that that's the thing, twice on top of the weapon, and just go to town essentially with a Brave Bow unit. Because that's the type of unit that gains the most from this type of buff. So you'd expect a refine that works with weapon initiation, right? Since that's typically when you take the most advantage of the weapon. Well, no. Instead they decided to give Death and Res and a breath effect. Let me just put it this way. The main unit I would use Brave Lucina with was Jamke, and well, before that George. So why in God's name, okay? Why in God's name did they go with the thing that doesn't work with this type of unit? After all, would you want to face tank an enemy unit with a brave weapon on enemy phase? I have a feeling, a distinct feeling, that no, that is not the case. So the weapon is very conflicting. From one side you have a very offensive support base effect, and then from another side you have a very defensive support as the refine. They don't really work hand in hand, do they? Ideally, what I would have done if, you know, I was the one behind designing refines, okay, and this is very basic, increasing the buff of attack and speed to +5, that way the niche become that your niche is that way your niche ends up being an offensive buff niche, right? Whereas Marth gets the generalist role, which frankly he does better than Bravelyn, because unlike Bravelyn, Marth gives 2 across the board to everyone. Mage, dragon, melee, doesn't fucking matter. They all get the buff. And Kaden does the same. So why did they want to focus on, well, giving just 3 across the board? It's like they completely missed the fact that Marth and Kaden even existed. If anything, I guess even 5 attack 5 speed might be low. I would have went for 6 attack 6 speed. That way, at worst, it's tied with Kaden, who also gives Def and Res. And at best, well, Kaden would be in a situation where you could not be around the units, or you would get panicked but as a result, which means all the buffs are gone, or anything of the sort. In which case, Brave Lucina would be just a better buffer, right? But instead, they decided to just go for the let's put stat all around. And like I said, all you're left with is a breath effect, because Kaden just essentially give twice the stats with a very easy to set up weapon. Just basically run the speed res link with attack and def tactic on someone else, and oh look, you have 6 across the board. and everyone around you gets the buffs. It's very easy to set up. So as a result, the fact that she gives stat all around is just kind of laughable, really. Because the fact that she gives def and res plus 3 kind of just, well, to put it simply, took the stats out of attack speed buffs that, you know, attack and speed could have gotten. Thankfully, the breath effect can work on units that are not infantry, because otherwise you could actually make the case that infantry breath on Marth would genuinely be a better option outside of AR, because an AR Aversa is very common. Still, the way it is right now, it is a very niche weapon. That said, the niche is very strong when it really works. Brave Ike is a good example of that. After all, Brave Ike can't really run Breath and DC at the same time, or can he? Brave Lucina does give that to him, which is, first of all, very good, and two, because of Irvan's Reaver's Desperation, and I guess I'm talking about the best refine of the batch here, but his refine essentially makes so that the first hit only does 60% of the damage, and then the second hit only does 20%, and the enemy is forced into desperation when attacking him. So his damage, the enemy's damage, will always be lowered by quite a bit. This is Ike's strength, of course. And well, to put it simply, getting 4 charge because you get hit twice because of Ger's Kogel is pretty nice. Because Aether is a 4 cooldown because of his cooldown -1 on his weapon. To put it simply, you basically bait, get doubled, and proc Aether back to heal back all the HP you lost. The only issue with this is, well, like I said, remember when I said that the base is meant to be offensive and the refine is meant to be defensive? Yeah, the offensive part is kinda fucking you over here, because Ike actually has a decent amount of speed. Nothing amazing, of course, but it can actually prevent doubles. And if you prevent a double, well, you prevent your chance of instant Aether. Why does this matter? Well, to put it simply, if you only get hit once and then hit back, say the enemy has 50 HP and you do 40 times 2 because of quick riposte, well, 50 minus 40, 10, then you proc Aether on the 10 HP, you only heal 5 health instead of 20. Yeah, the speed backfires. Just like the def and res is kind of irrelevant in some cases as far as archers are concerned. It's a very awkward weapon. Honestly, I would have just made so that it grants 5 attack and speed to physical units, and the refine would just have been a breath effect that works, you know, on initiation if you're under the effect of buffs. Put it simply, well, it would essentially be Special Fighter without the guard effect if you're initiating while being buffed by the 5 attack and speed drive. But instead, well, we got this. What a missed opportunity. Anyway, this is the build that I will showcase for Brave Lucina. That said, do understand another thing, right? Infantry Rush is good to actually allow you to get charges on initiation, but you lose drive attack or drive speed as a result, which means you lose power, which means this might not even be worth it in a lot of team comps. Oh, and another thing, the biggest weakness that Ger's Kogel has is if you really want to make full use of it, you need a full physical team. Full physical team means you can't run something like Sorcery Blade or Infantry Hexblade, since Infantry Hexblade only goes in infantry tome units. Yes, it is that precise. And you can't use dragons either. Dragons are some of the best breath users, and you can't even use them with this refine. Let that sink in. So as a result, well, you're kind of screwed, isn't it? There are a few units that can really make use of it. Brave Ike is a good example. But most of them, well, they don't. It makes for very awkward teams, especially if you want to use her as a buffer and you have a dancer. Like, for example, here's the team that I wanted to use her in. Brave Lucina, Legendary Tiki, New Year Guntra, and Rayson. Rayson doesn't care about getting the buffs. He doesn't fight. He's here to provide healing and dancing. Brave Lucina isn't infected by her own weapon. Legendary Tiki is a dragon, so she gets no effect. And you're all only left with New Year Guntra. So, yeah, like New Year Guntra can gain a lot from 3 across the board and a breath effect. But, I mean, if that's the only unit that gains the effect, is it really worth it? You see what I mean? It's a very niche weapon. Powerful when it works, but very niche. Anyway, the other issue with Infantry Rush is the fact that, well, if your team is not all based on attack and you have one that's based on speed, like say Nyla or Ira, which don't really need Infantry Rush, but for the sake of argumentation, let's say they do, well, they won't get the stat most of the time because their attack is too low. So you'd want to have Infantry Flash instead. But then if not all your team is based on having a good chunk of speed, then Infantry Flash doesn't even do much either. It is awkward. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. You can also run attack speed ruse with rally attack def, though ideally, of course, since you'll be in a full physical team, which means if you find a very high def tank, you're kinda screwed, attack def ruse would be ideal. It's just that it's not out yet, so that's why I'm explaining it now. Breath is good to provide damage with Ignis, which allows her to be a good damage dealer as well. The effect that got added, obviously, was effective against dragon foes to the base effect with Refine. Dragon killers are useless nowadays because Naga can just make anything a dragon killer anyway. So, honestly, that addition means nothing in the grand scheme of things. Thankfully, she's blue, which means she can have some kind of use against units such as Halloween Myrrh. So there's that. But yeah, not much to say about it other than this. Next up, let's start to talk about the actual winners of this Refine bunch. Brave Roy. Yes, I do consider Roy to be worse than Eliwood. We'll get to that when we get to it. So, Blazing Durandal used to be Heavy Blade, but now it's a Heavy Blade without the attack requirement. However, you do not get the extra charge on enemy phase whatsoever, even if you have more attack than the enemy now. So, I guess to some that might be a downgrade. Still, for the most part, this is a huge upgrade. Special fighter on initiation is no slouch. Honestly, though, the weapon was not made for Roy, it was made for Eliwood. Let me just put it this way, okay? Look at this, okay, real quick. Grand speed plus 7 and def plus 10. Alright, Brave Roy has 34 speed. Does he really need the 7 speed? Not really. could just run Swiss Sparrow with, say, a horse buff, and you're done. Even unmerged, that's enough. So the speed doesn't really seem to be aimed to him in particular. Def plus 10, well, I mean, it does give him 36 def, but the res is just left behind at 24. A bit awkward, isn't it? Meanwhile, let's look at Eliwood. Oh, hey, the 10 def pushes his def and res to 33 and 32 respectively. How peculiar. Oh, hey, his speed is fairly atrocious at 30. Well, steady impact fixes that with the 7 speed, pushing it to 37. Huh. His attack is not as great as it could be. Well, the weapon is a 19 might weapon. I think you see where I'm coming from here. In a lot of ways, this weapon was designed for Eliwood far more than it was for Roy. It just complements his stat line way too well compared to Roy. Still, Roy is fairly solid overall. It's just his dad is better. As for the build, it's fairly obvious. I mean, Mystic Boost to provide healing over time while you can keep going for Gale Force. Sturdy Blow and Attack Res Solo to actually provide bulk. It's all too simple. As far as boon goes, Attack Plus is an option, although if you're going to be on high merges, you already have so much attack that, frankly, if you're going to go for Attack Plus, it's going to backfire. Take that from someone that has a base 65 attack Rid that jumps to 71 attack with an attack buff and goes out of his way to use nothing that can provide any kind of extra attack to Rid. 71 attack is already too much at times. So 74, well, it's foolish to say the least. So don't do it. Sturdy Blow is really good to provide bulk, and frankly, as far as seal skill are concerned, there's not a whole lot of options you can really run. So Sturdy Blow is kind of ideal. Especially on lower merges where attack is not exactly a problem, but then this is just fine. So frankly, your best boons ends up being Def, Res, HP, and I guess to some extent, Speed. Speed can definitely work to some extent until you realize that it's mostly for enemy phase you'd want the speed. As when you're initiating, you already get 7 speed, so for example Roy here has 51 speed. With Speed Plus, he would have 47 speed on enemy phase, which at least provides him a better chance at living on an enemy phase in general. Def is a super boon, so this is the one I went with. This is honestly the ideal boon to go for a plus 10. And Res Plus is, well, it's decent. So with this type of stat line, you end up sitting on 50 defense, actually no, 54 defense, and 40 res. It's a bit awkward, isn't it? Well, that is to be expected, frankly. It's just the way the weapon was made. It was not made with Roy in mind. So, still 54 def and 40 res is fairly solid. And so is 51 speed on top of 71 attack. This makes him one of the best Gale Force unit. Not to mention, it also shuts down enemy from getting any points of special while you get the points of special, which can make the difference between you getting Gale Force and not. Not to mention, as far as Heavy Blade is concerned, this seal is heavily requested by so many units that having something that is built in to give the charges instead of Heavy Blade is a huge blessing. In general, if you do have a Brave Roy, I would really suggest blessing him for AA at the very least. Because by God, it's going to give you so much more advantages. There are still plenty of green armored units, so of course he does just great against them. With that said, most of what I said concerning Roy works on Eliwood, except that his stat line is overall better. As you can see, Sturdy Blow with his weapon pushes his defense to 50, while Attack Res Solo pushes his res to 48. 50 def, 48 res. 8 more res at the cost of 4 def. So already there, better mixed bulk overall. And 47 speed, which is the magic number for speed, honestly, so hey, it's almost like it's made for him, huh? 6 attack from Attack Res Solo, and 4 attack from Sturdy Blow pushes that to 70 attack as well. Which, wow, surprise, surprise, 70 attack, 47 speed is just great. Not to mention, like, to put it simply, if you're comparing Brave Roy to Eliwood, well, they essentially have the same attack and speed. It's just that Eliwood ends up having more bulk. I believe even as far as HP goes. Yep, by 1 point. Eliwood is overall better, but that's very obvious at the end of the day. They both have the same BST, it's just that the weapon was made to fix all of Eliwood's flaws. And they really did not care too much about, well, Roy. Steady Impact is interesting, although I will be honest and say if it wasn't for the fact that it's locked from horse units, well, it would not do that much. But even the fact that it's locked doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, blocking a follow-up doesn't matter if you kill on the second hit anyway, which typically will be the case with Eliwood and Roy. People are quick to forget that. So the fact that it has an impact skill doesn't really do a whole lot to him as a result. Still, it's not bad, since it works with his stat line. Anyway, let's go with our first and only S+ tier axe unit. I've already touched upon it a bit with Brave Lucina, talking about the combo with, you know, her weapon and DC, allowing him to face tank even mages fairly well, and just healing back 20 plus HP from them right afterward because of Aether. This weapon is really good. It seems simple on the surface until you realize just how good it is. 40% reduction on the first hit and then 80% reduction on the second. And if it's squatting, well, it's 40% reduction on the first, 80% on the second, third, and fourth. Whoop, sorry. So, yeah. This is ridiculous. It's a very strong weapon, as it essentially gives Brave Eye quite a bit of bulk. Do understand that the value of res and defense becomes a lot less apparent, however. For example, if you take 5 damage, because, you know, you lost 5 def on your second hit, well, you really only lost 1 health. So as a result, 5 def doesn't really look to be all that interesting, huh? Hell, even on your first hit, that 5 health that you should have lost becomes 3. In a lot of cases, prioritizing HP over stats is a sound strategy. Not to mention, if you're going to go in AR, for instance, with Brave Lucina and Ike, with say 2 airs? Well, first off, it gives you more health to tank, but 10 more res is also fairly welcomed. It actually evens up your attack, your def and res, and gives you
all the HP you really need. Like, as you can see here, I went with an HP plus boon, no surprises. As I said, it gives you more tanking ability overall than having more def and res. But as you can see, I have 45 def and 30 res. Imagine if I had 45 def and 40 res because of air on top of 67 health. Take a second to realize just how impossible you are to kill at that point. To put this in perspective, the new Ishtar, which is obviously a dancer, with 34 attack, a quadding weapon, and combat advantage, would fail to take the kill. To put this simply, right, even if Ishtar had essentially 60 attack, which translates to 72 attack because of combat triangle, right now, okay, right now, not even considering the air, so it's 42 times 4, okay? Alright. Well, the first hit does 26. And then, well, to put it simply, every hit after only does 8. That's 50 damage. You failed to kill Ike with 60 attack, quads, and a weapon advantage. It is this ridiculous. Ike is very hard to take down now, and is by far the best Choose Your Legend 1 unit, which I will admit is well deserved. At the very least, far more than for Ulm. But yeah, very, very, very strong Refine. Very hard to take him down, and like I said, combo with Brave Lucina or Infantry Breath, well, it's simply just like you said, like you saw how I took 50 damage from Ishtar. That would be a plus 10 Ishtar with maybe 40 health. I would then come back with Aether and instantly heal back up by 20, pushing my HP back to 27. 27 HP is enough to pull off very good fights still, and still be able to heal back. That's the thing with Ike. He's really hard to take down, and he keeps healing as a result with Brave Lucina. Even unmerged, he's really hard to kill. Frankly, if you have Brave Ike, you should refine him. He is what I call a must-have. All DS plus tier units here are must-haves. But, frankly, he is, I believe, in the top 3 as far as refines are concerned. I'd say the best refine is still Est, as weird as this is to say. Then it's Katria, and then it's Ike. Or hell, you could even say that Katria and Ike are about tied. A quadding slaying weapon is very strong. But then again, so is Ike. And in both of their case, if they want to be at full power, they have to be in specific team comps. You have to have Brave Lucina or Infantry Breath to really make Ike shine the best he can. And likewise, Katria needs to be in a flyer team. The difference is that I can fit a lot more teams. That's kinda it. Steady Breath is still an option if you don't have Lucina to combo into him. But frankly, ideally, as you can see, the DC Quick Repose set is probably the best way to go about it. Oh, and another set which someone pointed out, if you don't want to really rely on the quick riposte, or if you want to have a better way to ensure one-shots with Wrath, and therefore healing yourself back into the quick repose range. Wrath is a good option because you'll take the full brunt of your enemy's hit. So even though you have Aether, they can typically at least with this type of team get your HP down. As I keep saying about Wrath, and I'll say it again, the way Wrath works is very unique. I believe it's the only skill that works that way. But the way Wrath works is that it calculates your HP and then works. So to put it simply, when you proc a special, it verifies your HP right there and then. So despite you starting the fight with full HP, it doesn't matter. If your enemy essentially does 13 damage, you're in Wrath range, which means Aether gets an extra 10 damage, which means you have a better chance to healing enough to get back in quick repose range if you're fighting someone that's fairly tanky. Again though, just like Felicia, the main weakness as far as Ike is concerned are AoEs. AoEs cannot be affected by Irvan. Do keep that in mind. If an Ophelia attacks Ike, Ike is basically down for the count. He's going to get his full HP down to 1 because, well, 70 attack minus 20 res, or let's just say 35 res, equals 35 times 1.5, that's 52 damage. Yeah. But other than that, as far as just normal fights are concerned, it's very hard to take down Ike. And, well, that's also why when I showcased the buffs, I did not buff his speed. You do not wish to buff his speed, because that will backfire and force you to basically hit and then proc, and therefore your heals, which are what you rely the most on, will be a lot more inconsistent. Frankly, I really wish there was skills that would cost you speed to improve other stats, similar to Fortress skills. If those would be seals, well, Ike would be one of the best user of it. Hell, HP Speed Fortress would be really good, for example, for Ike. Like, say, losing 3 speed for 5 HP, or losing 3 speed for 10 HP, I guess, would be a fantastic seal for him. It would make him even harder to kill, and ensure Aether to be a more consistent healing machine. But yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about this batch. So hopefully you learned a thing or two, and well, I'll see you all later. Have a nice one, everyone.